We're starting off with note boxes 1 through 4. The first note box is a reference angle. So in a right triangle, you will be given a reference angle, okay? And so you can see that this reference angle is labeled over here in this top triangle, it's this top angle, and in the bottom triangle, it's the bottom angle. So essentially, in a given problem, I will tell you what the reference angle is. It depends on the problem. The reference angle can change depending on the problem, but the problem should tell you what the reference angle is. Okay, so the reference angle is just given to you in the problem. They will tell you, look at this angle or look at that angle. It will be told to you in the problem. And then there's going to be parts of the triangle that are based on the reference angle. The first part of the triangle that we're going to talk about, and when I say part, I mean the side of the triangle. The first side of the triangle that we are going to talk about is the hypotenuse. So over here in box number 2, we have the side of the triangle across from the right angle. So in a right triangle, you have a right angle. Directly across from that is the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse of a right triangle does not change no matter what, okay? Like it will always be the one across from the right angle. Then let's take a look at box number 3, the opposite leg. The opposite leg of the triangle is the side of the triangle that is across from the reference angle. So in a problem, if I say the reference angle is this one over here where it says reference degrees, if this is my reference angle, then this is the opposite side because it's opposite of the reference angle. Okay? And if I gave you that same problem, but then I tell you the reference angle this time, I want you to use the top as the reference angle. If I change the reference angle, the opposite leg will change. Now, the opposite leg is on the bottom because it needs to be opposite of the reference angle. That's what the opposite stands for. You don't know what opposite means until I tell you opposite of what. So in this case, opposite means opposite of the reference angle. So the moment the reference angle changes, the opposite leg will change as well. So it depends on the reference angle. Okay? Depends on the reference angle. Any questions up until here? Okay, if you do have questions, just type them in the chat or say it out loud. Doesn't matter, just interrupt me. I don't mind, okay? Because I can never tell if you're raising your hand right now. Let's go on to adjacent leg. Adjacent to what? It's adjacent to the reference angle. Adjacent means next to, okay? So like if you're sitting next to me, you are adjacent to me. So let's go take this triangle and let's say the problem says the reference angle is this bottom one over here. This is my reference angle. Then the adjacent leg must be the one directly touching it. So it's this one. And some of you might be thinking, but Miss Jade, there's 2 sides of the triangle that are directly touching that angle. The other side is this one right over here. You're like, why is this one not the adjacent side? Why is that? Why is this one not adjacent, but the other one is? Well, this blue side is directly across from the right angle. This one's the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse cannot be your adjacent. The hypotenuse will always be directly across from that right angle. So the hypotenuse of the triangle doesn't change no matter what. Remember we said that? Hypotenuse will stay the same always in the triangle. Same thing for this bottom example. This is already the hypotenuse. We don't even need to consider it for adjacent or opposite. This is just the hypotenuse. It is what it is. It's not going to change. And the reason it is the hypotenuse is because it is directly across from, directly across from the right angle. Sorry, I changed pages on accident. So that blue side is the hypotenuse, usually abbreviated like HYP for hypotenuse. And then now let's figure out what our adjacent leg is. So they gave us this reference angle on the top, and then adjacent means next to it. So not on the opposite side, but next to it. So what's the only other side touching our reference angle is this one. This is the adjacent leg. So the adjacent leg touches the reference angle. Any questions with that? Okay, so then let's go back to the first box. I just want to reiterate everything. When you are given a triangle and given a reference angle, you can tell what the opposite leg, the adjacent leg, and the hypotenuse are. Notice once again that the hypotenuse doesn't change. In both the top and bottom triangle, the hypotenuse is still the longest side. The hypotenuse is still directly across from the right angle. It's still right there, across from the right angle. So the hypotenuse doesn't change. In both of these triangles, even though the reference angle changed, the hypotenuse stayed the same because the hypotenuse is always right across from the right angle. Then let's take a look at what does change. The adjacent and the opposite change. So on the top example, our reference angle is the top corner. So then the adjacent is right next to it, and the opposite is opposite of the reference angle. So notice how that is different from the bottom example. When you have the reference angle on the bottom, the adjacent is now next to it, and the opposite is now across. So those two switched, okay? So the opposite and adjacent will switch depending on where your reference angle is, and the hypotenuse will always stay the same. Any questions? All right, then let's end these notes.